Word. Alrighty, I think we got it this time without exploding our ears.
Right.
Oh, so it's been a busy couple of weeks personally for us, so welcome to Storytelling on the Plains. Every week we do this, I think I'm going to move my microphone so I'm not, leaning, and I don't, so there we go. Because what I was doing was I would have it here and then slide it back out of the way and then never remember, and we'd hit record, and then within 5 seconds my brain is going, oh great, I'm stuck here for an hour now.
These chairs are quite comfortable.
Yeah, not bad for cheap $25 chairs.
That's all.
Dealing with some personal life stuff for the last couple of weeks, I thought this week we would shift to a building rather than a person.
Isn't that exciting, folks?
Oh yeah, it's a building.
Riveting, yeah.
I came across this. I forgot I had literally photographed when I had been down at Legacy, the information on the Tri-State Land Company headquarters building. And then just kind of set it aside. I was working on I don't even remember what story I was working on for the paper, but it was in a folder with pictures of some Lakota, pictures of Dr. Fix. Remember when I said I had that autobiography stuff for Dr. Fix? And I found it in this folder. Trying to get better organized, and there were a couple of other things that I had photographed, and when I started reading this, it was the application for the building to be put on the historic register. And have you ever driven past a building in town and gone, that looks pretty old, I wonder what that was?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them around here.
Quite a few, yes.
And I've done that a lot, driving around here, and sometimes there's a really fascinating history of the building, like the Lincoln Hotel, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots of information about it, and then sometimes there's, that was built in 1905, and no one knows anything else about it. And then you have things that are kind of in between, like the Tri-State Land Company headquarters building, and I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about the buildings, because there aren't a lot out here in western Nebraska that are on the historic register, and it was preserved for a reason, and we're going to talk about that today. But in that folder, I found 7 or 8 other things that I had photographed, because when I worked at the Star-Herald, what would happen is I would go to do Story X and do the research at Legacy, and then I would see a folder that said, interesting topic number 1. Be like, oh, what is that? And then I would take pictures of what was in the folder with the intention of getting back to it. I used to be able to do that under the first 2 editors that I had. Under the last editor, I didn't have that opportunity, and that's when I got the photographs of the application, because things just kind of went south there at the Star-Herald, and anybody who reads this from 2025 into the future, the print edition of the paper is going to stop, and then what are we going to have? So I would literally go over there to get the information I needed and then grab a folder and photograph what I had, with the idea of maybe one day I can get to this. And so I'm glad I had this, because I went to, and this is the interesting thing too, I went a couple of weeks ago to it's housed on the National Park Service website, all the information about this, and I downloaded the PDF of their application, which is better than my crappy photographs. It made it much easier to work with, but today is first second week in February 2025. And I went last night just to look, and I can't get the webpage to load. And we all know what's happening in the U.S. government right now. So I don't know if it's just temporarily offline or not. But I did.
Kind of scary.
Yeah. So when people ask me why do I grab stuff way ahead of time, this is why, because I don't know how long it's going to be available.
Yep.
Many, many years ago, there was a TV show I used to watch called Forever Night, and it's about this vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire anymore. It's a show out of Canada. And it wasn't being released on DVD, it was held up in rights, all that crap. And you could go to the pirate sites and get the episodes. And that was literally the only way for anybody to have it. And at the time, I really liked the show. And I wanted to watch it again, and I couldn't. They did re-air it in Canada because it's a Canadian show.
Sure.
But once it aired here once in syndication, you couldn't get it anymore. And I don't even know if it's available now. So there was a lady in Canada who recorded it off a TV, and I had the episodes that way.
Oh, nice.
If you happen to look just right over here on my shelf and you go to the letter F, you can see I have all 3 seasons on DVD. But that was my worry, was it was never going to be available again. And I've done that with mostly out-of-print books and stuff that I use for research.
Yep.
When I see it, I grab it. No, I'm not going to get to it till next year, but is it going to be available next year?
Yeah, because there's so many of those historians nowadays that only print, maybe a couple hundred books themselves usually. They usually self-publish, and they do what they do, get what they get, and then they stop.
There is a book that I got. It's out of print, and it is available on the Internet Archive. So I'm reading it on and off there because you got to flip the pages there. You can't download it. But it's out of print, but it's about another murder in western Nebraska in what is it, Banner County, I think it was. But again, I want to get through it, and I'm taking notes as I'm going through it, and I'm typing up the quotes that I want as I'm going through it, because I could go back tomorrow and it's gone.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Also, that's why we should always support your local library, because our local library took the immense time to take all the microfilm and put it on computer archives now, so you can access it. Anybody can access it, and I think that's really important, and something also the government and big government at least can't take away from us.
Right.
So yeah, definitely always support your local libraries.
Yep. So I now do have the PDF from the government of this, and it made it much easier to read because, if I'm taking a picture of you for something we're going to use, I'm going to get a good picture. But if I'm at Legacy and I'm reporting on a different story, I'm just going click, turn the page, click, turn the page, click, turn the page.
Yeah.
And then when I get home, oh crap, it wasn't quite in focus. So then I'm reading a slightly out of focus thing. So it was nice to be able to get the PDF. But yeah, I support any place, even like Legacy, that archives stuff and keeps stuff there. And I know they're going through the process of digitizing a lot of stuff too. So anyway, today I found it kind of interesting, even though there's a bit of information, and I found a bit more about it. And to me, that's part of the fun and interesting bit of when I started looking at this. I thought, oh my God, there's nothing. There's nothing about this building. And then I found more. Then I found more. Then I found more. And to me, that's
This was one of the more creepier buildings when I was a kid growing up.
Yeah.
Was this building?
And I know you and I have talked as well that we don't care how long the episode is. It could be a half hour, 45 minutes, or, we could talk about bighorn sheep for an hour and 38 minutes. It doesn't matter if it's interesting we want to share the story. And I found this interesting, and I also found the process interesting as well to share with folks of what I went through. And I'm sure after this episode gets published, someone's going to call me and give me a ton of information. I'll be like, dang it. But I don't know where else to reach. I've reached out where I could. So today we're going to talk about the Tri-State Land Company headquarters building. And my notes that I've had on it are a few years old, but they're not really changing because the building's over 100 years old, so it's not changing. And the vast amount of information that I got from the building came from the National Register of Historic Places, and the application that was used to justify it being listed as a historical building. The form does have I forget right now because I don't have it in front of me, the form has a gentleman's name on it, and his address is in Lincoln, and I'm assuming that all of those applications go through the Historical Society in Lincoln. Because the person who put the application into the federal government, his address was the Historical Society's building in Lincoln.
Sure.
So, but there's no way he got all that information sitting in an office in Lincoln. He came out here and talked to somebody. So, although its proper name is the Tri-State Land Company headquarters building, I'm just going to refer to it as the Tri-State building or the Tri-State Land Company building because it's a mouthful. And if you'd like to visit the building, it's located at 13 West Overland Street in Scottsbluff. You can type it in online as well. There's someone on Flickr, is that it? The photograph site?
Yeah,
that has some pictures of it too. So the Tri-State building was constructed in 1907, and at the time it was submitted to be placed on the Historic Register in the 90s, it was considered the best of the remaining buildings that had been associated with the Tri-State Land Company. So I didn't really know anything about this company until I started working on this story. In 1907, Scottsbluff was still a fledgling town looking for ways to grow and stand on its own, and irrigation still had a long way to go toward the more efficient systems that arose in the decades to come. I think as the future goes on, we'll probably still find more efficient ways to do irrigation here, but we're still kind of in its infancy. We have built a whole bunch of dams over in eastern Wyoming. So we do have a process in place. It's just not as good as it is today, but you're looking at 100 years difference. And if you're going to irrigate, you need canals. So the Tri-State Land Company bought an abandoned canal, fixed it up, and then extended it. And Hayward Levitt helped to make all this possible. And a little side note, and we're going to get into Levitt a little bit later. Levitt is originally from New York, and there was a store in New York growing up called Levitt's, and it was a furniture store. And I hate this. As soon as I read Hayward Levitt, the jingle started playing in my head, and I haven't heard that since the 1980s. And I'm like, man, I hate that. And it also makes me wonder if he's not related to the Levitts that are still in New York because he was originally from there.
Sure.
Probably. I didn't get that much into Mr. Levitt's history. He was working in Hall County, which is in eastern Nebraska, on his farm and experimenting on sugar beets, and his work got attention from other parts of the state. And in 1902, he moved to Scottsbluff County. He spent some time checking out the valley And apparently he liked it, and he thought he could do well in business here. So that's why he came here. We're going to talk a little bit about Levitt in this episode, but not too much, because he is the dude that I want to write a separate episode for. Yep. And when we get to something else that he did, I'll explain why. So Levitt went off and took charge of the Farmers Irrigation Project, which was in receivership at the time. And I'll get into a little bit more detail of that here soon. He then purchased 36,000 acres of land, and 4 years later, in 1906, he formed the Tri-State Land Company, which he financed in the construction of the canal at Scottsbluff. So his company bought that abandoned canal, but it was because he was already a successful farmer and took over the irrigation project. So it was a natural extension of what he was already doing. So the Tri-State Land Company was also responsible for the large-scale production of sugar beets in the area, and they did this by growing sugar beets on company land. That's how it kind of all started. And the history of the Sugar Beet Company is a completely separate story.
Yeah.
Speculative investors also purchased large tracts of land from Tri-State with the hopes of becoming rich. So he's got his hands in a bunch of little pies that's making him rich, but he's also smart enough to recognize that this area is a good place for sugar beets. And his ideas behind sugar beets changed how this valley works and put this valley on the map. And there is a PDF of an article that was written in agricultural history. I came across it. I really want to read it and do a proper episode with Hayward Levitt, but I don't have the money to get access to the journal, but they provided an option where I could email the author. So I emailed the author, and I'm just waiting to hear back to see if I can get a copy of what they wrote, because I think that would add to Mr. Levitt's story because of how influential he was in this area.
And for those who don't know, a sugar beet is like most people think of sugar they get from sugar cane down south, down in the island. Sugar beets were developed pretty early in the mid-1800s, early 1800s, but they found out how to get the sugar from this plant, this beet, which is really just like a large potato. I'm actually not sure what family it's in. It might be in the same family as potatoes. I'm not sure. But anyway, they extract the sugar from it, and it's honestly, I can't tell the difference. I can tell the difference when it's in like soda pop and stuff, but like tablespoon, I don't think I can catch the difference. But that was a huge deal because at the time the U.S. greatly depended on sugar from outside sources. So having sugar beets here in America, especially Central America, greatly helped us throughout trading and all that kind of stuff, economy-wise. So sugar beet growing here was such a big deal that we were the largest growing city for a short amount of time, a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I remember going through the historical data for some other story that I was doing about population.
Yep, our population spiked for a couple of years during the big sugar boom is what it was called, and it was when the factories were going. We have factories in almost every minor town here, everywhere from Bayard. Did Bayard have one? Mitchell, Gehring. I think Bayard and Torrington has one.
Minutair had
Miniature,
one.
I think, had one,
all the small.
Pretty much every small town had a sugar beet factory, and that's how those towns cropped up. So it was a huge deal for once upon a time.
And I would say even today, if the sugar beet factory closed, it might be different numbers now, but the hospital has usually been the number one employer
Sure,
in
yeah.
Scottsbluff, and then the sugar factory is
It's
a
number
close
2.
number 2. And if the sugar beet factory closed, this town's done.
It is, and it would be detrimental. And there's a lot of talks about that because the sugar factory is one of the oldest in this county.
Yep.
And especially now that you have it moved more towards Colorado and
Yes.
Wyoming,
Yep.
there's newer facilities there that are much, much more efficient.
And I've lived here almost 18 years, and they closed the one in Mitchell not long after I moved here. The one down in Gearing, they just use it for storage.
Yep.
And
Same
so,
with Mitchell.
yeah.
They use it for grain.
And the sugar factory still uses the building
Oh, for sugar storage.
for sugar beet related storage.
Storage,
I think
okay.
trucks
Yeah, I
and
know-
stuff might be down
I know
there.
the one in Mitchell, if
but-
you go out there, there's just grain.
There's
just
grain in
corn,
the
just
silos
huge
now. Yeah.
corn.
And I have heard talks about it being closed as well, because I think the one in Scottsbluff for the Western Sugar Company, I believe the one here is the oldest of all the ones that are still operating.
Yep.
And I have toured it. They do a tour once a year, usually the first week in December, and they limit it to so many people, and you have to pay for the tour, but all the money goes towards scholarships, college scholarships.
Yep.
And
They really do. The sugar, we all know how much we depend on them, and I think they try the hardest to keep this factory going. But I mean, we have to face it. If you go over to Fort Morgan, just a few hours down the road, and look at their facility versus ours, I mean, we're way behind the times.
yeah, and
We're way
I
behind
think
the
what it
times.
comes down to is when they figure out how to make it cost effective, it's going to close, because right now it's still too expensive to drive all of those beet trucks.
Well,
down.
kind of, because all the beet trucks are now part of a collaborate. They're all together now. So now actually, it's really just one place or another, and they have storage sites on fields where they'll have just sugar beets hanging out to cool.
Well, you even see that here going south between Gearing and Kimball during harvest season. You'll see the piles of sugar beets they've been harvested. They're just chilling out, waiting for a spot to get into the factory and get processed.
And it's really dangerous right now because of our climate change. It has not had the hard freeze like back in the good old day. You would see these piles of sugar beets that are the size of small warehouses. I mean, they go up at least 20 feet high, and they'll go at least 20 feet, 30 feet long, easily, just big old piles, and they'll just sit there in the winter and freeze. Well, we don't have that luxury no more of freezing. In fact, we've, I think, only hit negatives of a couple times this year.
Yeah, and
So-
we haven't even really had snow. It snowed twice. Once by the end of the day, the snow was gone, and once the snow was gone the next day. So
Yep.
we didn't even need the plows out.
So what the beet drivers are now doing, instead of piling them up, is they're keeping it in the ground and digging as they go, which is horrible for us because it leads to our air quality spiking to not almost, it's beyond dangerous levels. There's times where the beet gets going and the trucks get going, and you shouldn't be outside. Whereas, like I said, back in the 90s, when the weather was still cold, they would have had all the beets up by now.
Yes.
The harvest season would have been over because the ground would have been frozen. But
Yep.
the ground's not frozen now, so now we're kicking up dust. There's no rain, no snow to keep it down, and we're all choking to death. So
Yeah. So lovely climate change, but
Good.
this
I'm
is
sorry, not to get a side tangent about
no,
sugar
that's
beets,
okay.
but-
It all explains why this building is so important to the history of this area. So I'm going to go ahead and read the history of how this all got to be from the application, because they spelled it out pretty well, and it's kind of stupid to me to rewrite what they already wrote. I'm just going to quote them. It details the backstory of what happened and how Levitt ended up buying the canal. In the 1880s, farmers in eastern Colorado used water from the South Platte River to irrigate their fields. For those of you that don't know, the Platte River runs through Nebraska, and it splits right around the city of North Platte and you get the North Platte River, which comes up here by us, and the South Platte flows into Colorado. So in case you didn't know that. Having been successful there, a number of farmers, including William Akers, moved into western Nebraska on the North Platte River in 1887 and began diverting water from the North Platte to irrigate their fields. That same year, Akers, John Coy, Virgil Grout, and about 11 other farmers formed the Farmers Canal Company. By October 1890, the Farmers Canal Company had constructed about 10 miles of the canal, which irrigated 2 sections of land. By the end of 1890, however, due to poor financing, construction and operations on this original canal ceased. Although the Farmers Canal Company was not successful, it demonstrated that the soil of the North Platte River Valley was suitable for irrigation fanning. The crop yields were good and there was an abundant supply of water. This aroused interest in irrigation and agriculture in the area. And, I mean, this is literally what made this town.
Yeah, because we're considered, if you're a biologist and
semi-arid.
you want to know our biome, our biome is high plains desert.
Yeah. Yep.
So we are an actual desert biome.
Yep.
So, yeah, a lot of people don't quite realize that, because if you just get down a little bit further toward the North Platte, you go down into wetland, and you're no longer part of the desert steppes. It doesn't, you actually step right off of it once, not too far from here, like once you get about to North Platte area.
Yeah.
You're off those steps. So,
and if you just look at a topographical map of the United States and you look at Nebraska, you can see where it's green, 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 brown. It's a very distinct drop off. It's not, to me, it's not a gradual drop off. It's very distinct.
Yep, it's very distinct.
Where the land changes.
And we are still quite high up from sea level.
Yeah.
We're not as high as Denver, but we're not that much further lower. In fact, if you go north to Harrison, I think Harrison's only a couple 100,000 feet below Denver.
Couple hundred.
100, sorry.
Yeah.
1,000. 100,000.
That's right, folks. It's Sunday morning,
It is
and we
Sunday.
both
I woke
slept
up.
in, and I slept in an
awake.
hour and a half later than what I normally do. So,
I wish I could sleep. Oh, I had heartburn last night.
oh,
I had delicious catfish.
okay.
I tasted it all night. It was awful.
I had sea bass once in Athens, freshly caught, and the chef came out and explained to me the different ways that it could be cooked, and I'm like, I've never had sea bass before, dude. Oh my God, it was awesome, and if I wasn't poor, I probably would have ordered another one. I slept last night because I haven't slept the last 3 days, and my body finally just said, nope, we're done. So I crashed.
Ugh.
So, and I hate that. I would rather get sleep
awful.
every night rather than having the crash.
Oh, yeah. No, I usually sleep like a baby, which pisses off my husband. I do. I mean, I'm dead to the world. When I'm out, I'm just like, nope.
Sweet. I'm going to go rob Connor's house tonight.
You could. Get away from it. The dog could bark. I'd be like, yeah, whatever.
I'll bring some steak for the dog. So, although as the Farmers Canal Company failed, William H. Wright from Weeping Water, Nebraska, devised a plan to purchase the company. And Weeping Water, again, is on the eastern part of the state. In 1891, he and his associates acquired the Farmers Canal Company and authorized a bond issue of $450,000 for the new corporation. That's a crap load of money today.
Yeah, no kidding.
Way more back in 1891. Initial bond sales were sufficiently successful to allow construction on the old canal to continue. However, the nationwide financial panic of June 1893 adversely affected bond sales. Consequently, Wright was unable to meet payroll, and work stopped on the canal, which had grown to 30 miles in length. No new construction took place on the canal for several years. On December 23, 1901, Robert Walker purchased the canal and water rights at a foreclosure sale. His purpose was to hold the canal in receivership for the Tri-State Land Company. This company was formed the same year in New Jersey by H.G. Levitt, who is our Hayward Levitt. Mr. Levitt, who had experience growing sugar beets elsewhere in Nebraska, wanted to try beet production in the western part of the state. Levitt knew that irrigation was necessary to grow beets in western Nebraska, and he promoted the renewed construction of what came to be known as the Tri-State Canal.
So just so that 450,000 nowadays is $1,750,000.
Oh my God! Dang.
Just to let you know, yeah, $1,750,000.
Oof. And the Tri-State Canal is still the main canal around here.
It is. And it functions pretty well with
Yes.
little maintenance, to my knowledge, that really goes on.
Yeah,
I mean,
usually-
I'm sure they maintenance it, but it seems like it's pretty well built.
So I was assigned one time to do a story on ditch diggers.
Ditch diggers.
You know, I'm not from here.
You're not going to amount to anything, Tom. You're just going to be a ditch digger.
And I had no idea what a ditch digger was, because to me, ditch digger, you're digging a ditch. Yeah, the ditch diggers are the guys that go out in the spring, clean out all the crap that's fallen into the canals.
And they make more than you think they do.
Yeah,
for being
they do.
Ditch diggers.
Yeah, yeah. You make fun of them all you want, but they're making more money than you are.
Yeah.
They go through, they clean out all the canals of all the crap that's accumulated over the winter, and they go out and they turn the
water off.
the water
On or off, on and on.
Yeah, because we're in spring, so they turn it on, and everybody gets allocated so much. And it used to all be done by paper. Now it's all electronic. But every farmer gets an allocation of water, and when that allocation is done, they go out and they turn your thing off. I don't even know where to begin researching this, but my first editor, Steve, told me that there used to be massive fights about the water.
Oh, sure.
Even with guns drawn and stuff, because there is no water here. So you rely on that stuff. So people downstream were saying, you know, like I might be like, yeah, Conner lives 2 miles upstream. He's stealing my water. And then we get into fist fights and stuff over it. And they've
Well, and especially when center pivot irrigation came around. And for those, I didn't know this. I didn't quite even realize this going out east, out to Sioux Falls. I had a buddy that came here. He's never seen a center pivot. So for those who don't know what a center pivot is, it's a giant sprinkler system. That's all it is. It's basically, the reason it's called a center pivot is because it's, really the easiest way to explain it is one of those old tractor sprinklers that just go round and round, but it's anchored into the ground, so it just makes it a complete circle. But it's this giant rigging. It's really hard to explain. It's this giant rigging on wheels that just goes around your crop and is a sprinkler. It just sprinkles the water on top versus normal irrigation where you actually dig the trenches. And there's still great debate to this day. I heard about farmers just the other day getting into a huge debate about pivot irrigation versus traditional irrigation.
And then there's some crops that drip irrigation works better. So, you know.
And drip irrigation, that's not much of a thing out this way because of what we grow. You either need the good old-fashioned, trench irrigation or center pivot.
I know when I first moved here, there was... because there's drip irrigation, row irrigation, pivot irrigation, all sorts of ones.
Do you like this audience that this is what Nebraskans have to talk about all day? They're talking about irrigating crops. What is wrong with you right now? You have better things to do on a Sunday night than to listen to this. And you are listening to us talking about Nebraska irrigating crops.
Oh, but see, I normally would have been like, whatever, and I think that's why my editor at the time, Steve, sent me out, because I'm like, I don't give a crap about irrigation. So he sends me out because he knows I'm going to learn everything there is to know. And then when I went to the irrigation district in Mitchell or Morrill. God, it's been 10 years since I did this story, so I forget. But I was talking to the guy, and he was explaining why you want drip irrigation for this crop and pivot for this crop and this for this crop. And when he explained it,
because I'm a grower, I like to grow crops. Me and my husband, that's what we do. We love that. We love to talk about it. But
most people don't.
God help you if you have to put up a conversation with me and Jason.
I did a story before I stopped writing for money, because nobody pays me for my writing now. I did a story on the guy that is the president, I think, of the Nebraska Bean Growers Association. And
how do you get that job? Is that do you campaign for it?
Actually, he didn't. He was just a bean. Beans? Yeah, he's just a bean grower, and they're just like, we need to rotate. It's your turn.
I got the beans. I got the beans to lead you. I tell you what.
But I found the stuff he told me pretty darn interesting. And then when I came home and told my husband about it, he was like, "What? You talked to a guy for 3 hours about beans?" And I go, "Yeah." And I got this awesome cookbook. So apparently they put out a little cookbook several years ago, and he had a couple of copies left, and he gave it to me. I'm like, "Sweet," because I need to get more protein in my diet. So
got beans, yo.
This
beans, sugar, corn, cows.
Yeah.
What else do you need, guys?
And I just learned this morning too that I guess the Super Bowl is today.
That's right, it is today. I don't know who's playing.
I don't know who's playing either. I do know that I can't lie about that. I do know one of the teams is the Philadelphia Eagles, because my husband said that, who also doesn't follow football. He just found out like a week ago that the Super Bowl was today, but he doesn't want the Eagles to win because the Eagles gave Michael Vick a job after he abused all those dogs. So my husband can hold a grudge. You know, I don't care. We're not watching it tonight. I don't care.
I'm going to my parents, my mom and my grandma. You know, we watch every Sunday.
Your mom's a football fan.
She is, but I go for the food. You know, I go for the food. It's all about the food for me. I don't give. I've always said. I think my anthropologist teacher said it best that, I mean, it is a Neanderthal sport. It is proof that Neanderthals still exist as a part of our genome, because it's the only explanation. It's just a bunch of really stupid broly men smacking into each other. It's just like over a ball.
When my friend Pete came to America, he stayed at my mom's house for the couple weeks we were in New York to tour around, and the Huskers were in some bowl game. I don't care, but he ended up marrying my friend Misty. Misty and I went to college together, and Misty's brother played for the Huskers. And it was really hard trying to find information about Chris Dishman, because there's Chris Dishman, the one that I knew that was white, and Chris Dishman that was African American. So I would read stuff, and then I'd get halfway through an article. I'd be like, "Oh, it's the wrong one."
It's wrong, Chris Dishman.
But one of the guys just ran across the field, and Pete goes, "That guy just smacked that other guy's bum. What the hell?" You know, and he was all shocked by it, and Misty and I just kind of chuckled. We're like, "Yeah, that's what football players do. They smack each other on the butt all the time."
It's not just football players. I've learned. I've learned that working at the college. It is remarkable how handsy athletes are with each other.
I don't know, man. You get handsy with me, you're gonna get fisty back from me.
I don't know.
So Nebraskans will probably be talking football today too, but tomorrow they'll go back to talking about dry edible beans and sugar beets and corn.
Oh, yeah. The people that won the bets. They'll go home happy. Everyone else is,
Yeah.
You know. Well, they should have won. I'll hear, that's the big thing you'll hear the next day. Well, they should have won.
Yep. Thankfully, I'm not leaving my house tomorrow, so I won't hear anything from anyone.
I got class tomorrow, and I'm sure that's going to be on everyone's lips. Ugh.
Yeah. Take some earplugs with you.
Right.
Yeah. So back to the Tri-State Land Company. In October 1904, after clearing several legal hurdles, that is a hard word for me to say, hurdles. I don't know why. Anyway, the Tri-State Land Company gained control of the canal and corresponding water rights. The company wasted little time resuming construction of the canal, and it was extended to 96 miles by 1905. And by July 1907, water ran it in the ditch to a point north of Minnetonka. And just speaking of the ditches, I had no idea. When I moved here, I worked at a country school as Cedar Canyon Elementary, and on both sides of the entrance to the school were these ditches that if I'm 5'4", if I jumped in it, I need help getting back out.
Well, the ditches, they're canals. I mean, they're deep canals.
Yeah, I had no idea what it was. I'm just like, why are these big ditches here? You know?
Yeah, my sister got into a car accident into one of those. She went right into one of those canals, swallowed a whole car up.
Yeah, very easily. Yeah.
Yeah, these are serious ditches. They're at least, like I said, 15, 20 feet deep.
Yep. So in 1907, to support the operation of the canal and associated land dealings, the Tri-State Land Company began construction of its headquarters building in Scottsbluff. On May 10, 1907, the Gearing Courier reported the company is getting material on the ground south of the depot to build its offices, warehouses, etc. And that's where it's still at. In November, the paper reported that Tri-State Land Company has moved their offices into the new building across the track. And that was in the November 8th, 1907 issue of the Gearing Courier. As its name implies, Tri-State Land Company's interest went beyond the canal's expansion and use. The company maintained its own land for sugar beet production and also sold real estate. For example, on August 23, 1907, the Gearing Courier reported that a party named O'Shea is here with a view of purchasing 1,000 acres of tri-state land. This transaction, or one similar to it, must have taken place because the newspaper later reported that O'Shea was showing prospective buyers the fine land in the valley. So they ran that story August 23rd. And then they're talking about O'Shea showing the land to buyers in November, so just a couple of months later. The role played by the Tri-State Land Company had a positive impact on both irrigation and sugar beet production. The company spent more than $1.5 million on the canal and other activities in the area. The purchase of the canal by Tri-State saved it from an uncertain fate. By 1909, however, the Tri-State Land Company was running into financial difficulty due to a slowdown in the sale of water rights. I would really have to find somebody who's a better expert at water rights in this area, because that could pretty much be an episode here too, because water rights are a very complicated issue.
Especially in this state. But I've heard, again, not to change the subject, that we are giving away some of our water rights to other states. They're talking about a canal being built. Yeah,
that's what Ricketts wanted to do when he was governor, and build the reservoir or whatever on the eastern part of the state. Nobody wants it.
No, nobody wants it.
He wanted it, but nobody else wants it.
No, we want our own water.
Yeah.
We don't want to end up like Colorado. I hate to say it, but Colorado's not in good shape. We don't want to end up like that.
And last year I interviewed a guy around this time, I think. He moved up here from Colorado, and he struggled with the decision because the farm that he had was his great-granddad's, and him and his dad saw what was happening, and they were just struggling. They were in Southwest.
Yeah, where the water crisis
Colorado,
is really going
and
on.
They're just over the border in Wyoming now, but everybody covered stories in eastern Wyoming. And his hard time was, this is the family plot, and I'm the fourth generation, and now I got to sell this. But his dad was like, yeah, we're selling it. And he talked with his mom a lot about it, that his granddad would be okay with him selling it, because they're farmers, they want to stay farmers, and they can't farm where they traditionally have. It's okay to leave the family home behind. So he had to come to terms with that. And then when he moved up here, he said he's been relying on his neighbors a lot, because he's like, oh, I need to go water the field. And his neighbors are like, no, dude, what are you doing? No, it's not time. So he said he essentially had to learn farming all over coming up to this area.
Farming here is completely different.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to be patient. Patience is a big thing.
Yep.
And you'll still see the amateurs every now and then.
Yeah.
Watering their fields. It's like, you do guys know it's going to freeze tomorrow, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing watering your field?
Yeah. So he said he relied heavily on his new neighbors to figure stuff out. So according to published documentation, in 1909, J.G. White and Company of New York took over the task of the canal's construction. Under their supervision, the canal system was virtually completed in 1911. The entire system was later purchased by the Farmers Mutual Canal Company, a Nebraska corporation, and in 1912, the Farmers Irrigation District was formed to take over the entire plant. This district includes its boundaries, all the irrigated land under the canal. And that information comes from the August 1914 edition of The Landowner. So Mr. Levitt saw what was going on and saw the opportunity to pick things up and expand things, and was in the right place at the right time, and was the right guy for it, because he had already been experimenting on sugar beets and was making money doing that, and he still had his ties back on the East Coast. So, it's a small world, so to speak, and you get everything working together. There's also an entry in the history of Western Nebraska and its people of Thomas F. Kennedy. He was a prominent businessman in early Scottsbluff, and his story starts a few years before the construction of the Tri-State building in Kansas. And Thomas is important to this story too, so we're going to take a little side trip. Thomas's dad was born in Ireland, and his mom was from New York State. So again, I always get asked, "You're from New York. Why are you coming out here?" Well, Levitt was from Jersey. There's tons of New Yorkers that come out here. Yeah, what it is we get sick of the hustle and bustle.
I can see that.
And it's quiet here.
It is. It's a different world. I tell people that a lot. If you're in any sort of major city and you come here, life slows down a day, if not more. Yeah. Like something that you only have an hour to do in most cities, you have half the day to get done if you want to.
Moving out here, I had to slow down my speech. So even if anybody ever thinks that I speak fast on the podcast, it's way slower.
I had to slow myself down too. Yeah. I was going 90 miles a minute when I was over in Sioux Falls. Even Sioux Falls isn't that much different from here, but it's still a major city on the east side. Yep. And out here, you got
to slow things down.
You got to slow things down, but you can't talk too slow, because that's the thing. We're not Eastern slow. If you talk to a lot of Easterners, they talk even slower than we do. Yeah. They talk. And not your neck.
No, I mean, you mean
not northern east. I'm like Virginia.
Yeah,
that kind of Carolina.
And they got their draws, different draws going on too. But time and again, New Yorkers move out here for whatever reason. This guy came because business. It happens, and
we have a lot of great We have a lot of great people. Johnny Carson is from Omaha. Norfolk. He's from Nebraska, is what I should say.
But there's a lot of famous people from Ford. Ford was born in Omaha. President Ford was from Omaha.
Born in Omaha. Yeah. The Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. Yep.
He wasn't from here, but he moved up to Albert Lee, who is just north of here, up in South Dakota. So yeah.
Yeah, so people move for all kinds of reasons, so stop asking me why I moved here. I mean, and obviously I like it.
There's something here.
Yeah.
It's quaint. It's quaint. It's not for everybody.
No.
That was one of the signs for Nebraska.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's not for everyone.
I love that. I don't know which side of the state you have to come into to street that sign, but it is. It's like, welcome to Nebraska. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, love it.
And you know, for me, it's a slower pace of life. People leave me alone. Yes, if you get yourself plugged into the community, everybody knows everybody's business. But
you have to take an immense amount of effort to do that.
And usually people that do that, they're members of the Lions Club, Kiwanis, United Way. Yeah,
the people that need that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the most part around here, the biggest thing that I tell people is you got to be a hard worker, otherwise you won't be liked. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't really matter where you're from. It doesn't matter anything else, but you got to be a hard worker because that's the only thing that matters in this town.
Yep. So I like it because I am left alone.
But still a hard worker.
Yes, yes. I work too hard sometimes. So Thomas's dad ran away from home at 13 and stowed away on a boat for America and eventually graduated from law school at Kansas University at 40. So, you know, good for him. Dang, you know. He then made a specialty of taking on pension cases. So as a lawyer, that was his focus. Thomas got his training in Kansas City, and he was his training first started with a firm of building contractors, and then he moved on to the produce business, and then according to a history of Western Nebraska and its people, on December 19th, 1900, Mr. Kennedy married Miss Alice Beasley, who was born at Mossy Creek, Tennessee, and they have one daughter, Alice Alberta, a student in the Scottsbluff High School. I did go to the Find a Grave website. They had more than one kid, but at the time this was written, they only had one kid. So I'm not purposely leaving his children out. I'm just quoting from a book written when he only had one kid. Mr. Kennedy and family are members of the Presbyterian Church. His parents belong to the Congregational Church. He was reared in the Republican Party and has loyally supported its principles all his life. And I'm just going to point out that the Republican Party of 1900 is the Democrat Party today. We're not doing history here, but go learn about
Southern. It is remarkable how the political parties swapped back in the day.
And it was a very purposeful switch as well, but we're not going to get into that because we're talking about a building. We're not talking history. So in May 1905, he moved to Scottsbluff, where he spent his first year as a cashier and office manager for the Tri-State Land Company. So this is why Thomas is important. He expressed an interest in helping the city to progress in every way possible. So Thomas was one of those guys that if he was here today, he would be involved in the United Way, the Lions Club, the Kiwanis Club, and all those other service clubs. He was that kind of guy. He served as the village clerk and on the school board, including as the school board secretary. While working at the land company, he moved up to become their secretary and treasurer. He always managed an extensive produce business. So, you know, I don't know if they ever sold sugar beets to eat. I do know a lady that, you know, she picks them up off the side of the road when they fall off the trucks, and she'll take them home and slice them up and eat them.
You can eat them.
Yeah.
They're when we were kids, that was kind of a thing. You did it for school. You'd pick them up off the side of the road, and we would have class, and we'd eat them raw. I think. Well, if you've ever had jicama, I think it's close to jicama. Is if you want a taste profile. So, and you can get jicama at your local grocery store, and it's kind of like that. It's a Swedish oniony potato, and it's I mean, I think if you cooked it up certain ways, it'd be good.
Okay.
But however, I don't.
I don't think
It's-
they ever
it's-
sold it that way, though.
Well, and it's relatively unpalatable, and I've never heard of any local chefs using it, which I find that fascinating. I find there's probably a reason for that.
Yeah.
Is that either in large quantities it's not good for you, which could be the case because you never know what kind of tubers, what they contain as far as mild form of arsenic or kind of poisons like that. Or it's just not palatable.
Yeah.
No matter how you cook it, it just tastes like shit. And I remember as a kid, it tasted more or less like shit. Like you could take a bite of it and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but you would not have a bowl of it.
Yeah. See, now this lady that I know, she will slice it up and eat it as a snack. And I'm just like...
And I suppose it's
But
not
she's-
terrible for you, but it's a starch. It's not good for you. That's the thing. It's potatoes. And for those who don't know, potatoes in any form aren't really necessarily good for you.
Yeah.
Because they're a starch.
Yeah.
It's a lot of empty carbs.
Empty carbs. Yep.
Yeah.
So Thomas then Thomas was noted that he always managed his extensive produce business and that he was engaged in this business, making a specialty of buying potatoes. And that's another crop that was big around here.
It was. There was a potato chip factory here once upon a time. Yeah.
And again, I interviewed a gal that does research on potatoes just north of Alliance, like 2-3 miles north of Alliance. When I interviewed her, she can't tell me, I know who they are, but she couldn't tell me who, on the record, who the companies are, other than if you eat potato chips, you've probably eaten potatoes that were grown here. But she does research on the potatoes, keeping an eye out for disease and all that kind of stuff. So we don't really do the potatoes down here in Scottsbluff anymore, but they are up north.
In Alliance,
Yeah.
Just like beans.
Yeah.
Beans are up near Alliance too. We're known for it's so weird we're called corn huskers. Corn is so far down on the scale as far as our agriculture that we have here.
Yeah, and especially since beef is the number one ag product.
Yep, beef is the number one egg.
In Nebraska.
Sugar's not too far behind, but then you also have wheat and alfalfa and, corn.
Yep.
Takes a while before you get to corn.
I forget the order. I was looking at a list yesterday because I stupidly got into an argument with someone on Reddit who said that we're the Cornhusker state because that's all we produce is corn. And I was like, are you serious, dude? No.
Probably we don't produce a lot of it, to tell you the truth.
And I had the top 10 list. I don't remember the order, but in addition to what you said, bacon, pigs
yeah.
are also huge here.
Pig farms here, yep.
And our governor right now is a pig farmer. And a lot of people do not like him, and they call him Piggy Pillin on Reddit.
Well, he doesn't do very savory things on his pig farms, does he?
No, including questionable deaths. But that's a story for another time. And he's on the eastern part of the state, so we're just dealing with this part of the state. So
that's another thing. Thank God for Nebraska. They didn't pull us. They didn't pull us South Dakota, where their government had to meet in the middle. So if you go to Rapid or Sioux Falls, there's still plenty of politics. No, all the politics are on the east side of the state of Nebraska. You want to be away from it? Come over to Scottsbluff. You're the furthest away from it that you can be.
Because and I even get that with people. They're like, well, what are they saying over in Scottsbluff about this, that, and the other thing? I'm like, well, you already know. Even though I'm a little tiny blue dot in a sea of red, it's a sea of red, and it doesn't come up unless you bring it up.
Yeah. You want to know what we're talking about out here? We were just talking about it. Beets corn.
Yeah.
We're talking about irrigation systems.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
And we're talking about, what the weather's going to be this year.
The weather.
And,
we like to talk about the weather so we don't have to talk about our feelings. That's the Midwestern way. Just how it is.
Oh God, Connor.
It's really cold out, isn't it? Yeah, it's freezing.
And they know how you feel by the way you say it's freezing. If you go,
freezing. No, it's
they're like, oh, Connor's having a bad day.
Like, I am.
One day, Connor, we just need to turn the thing on and just shoot the breeze. So anyway, that building has a historical significance here. And that's the backstory on the Tri-State Land Company. Their headquarters is that building that we're talking about.
It's still to this day?
No, it's used for a different purpose today. We'll get to that in a second here. So according to the application to the Historic Register, the building is a large 1 1/2 story frame building with a cross-gambreled roof. It was constructed in 1907 in the Dutch colonial revival style. And like I said at the very beginning, it's at 13 West Overland in Scottsbluff. And you want to see it, just you can go over there, drive by, look at it. It
stands out by itself.
Yeah.
There's no buildings around
yeah.
it anymore.
The hall is situated near the railroad tracks in the south part of the city on the edge of the business district. And at the time it was built, it probably was the edge. Because once you cross the bridge cross over the bridge, you're on the Scottsbluff Gearing Highway, and it's very weird because like one side has a Scottsbluff address, the other side has Gearing. It's bizarre how they did all that, and you're technically kind of at Terrytown too. So anyway, you're right in the southern part of the town. The nomination paperwork also details all the nitty gritty bits of what the building looks like, and one sentence stuck out to me. Here is also a wooden fire escape leading up to the second floor. So it describes every room, what they look like. I honestly glossed over some of it because that was boring to me. But if you want to go read the application, it details what it looks like. But it struck me that, why is the fire escape wooden? Because if it burns and you're on the second floor, how are you going to get out?
Well, it's pretty common back in the day. I
know, but you would think in the 90s when this application was put in that they would have taken the wooden one out and put a metal one in. I don't know. Who knows? But that just stuck out to me because that was my first thought. What if the fire escape catches on fire? Good luck. The nomination, although the building's been there 100 years, so I'm thinking it's probably not going to burn down anytime soon. The nomination application goes on to state that the building is of historical significance because of his association with agriculture. The Tri-State Land Company headquarters building is the best extant corporate representation of the important role this company played. So, the company is not here anymore, but that building is a representation of the influence it had in this building, which includes literally growing the town from nothing. So the building is also a good example of a commercial building constructed in Dutch colonial revival style with flared eaves and wood cladding. The small round windows on the gambrel ends are also common features. So the building is
creepy.
It's also noted that the building is the only known example of its architectural type in the region. And it makes additional points of the building's significance in the revival and extension of irrigation in the area, and the encouragement of sugar beet production on company-owned land. So I'm going to quote one more time. The story of the canal and irrigation systems that support North Platte Valley agriculture to this day cannot be told without understanding the indispensable role of the Tri-State Land Company. The company revitalized interest in a canal that was inactive for several years. The Tri-State encouraged agricultural development through its own corporate production and by the selling of farmland. The Tri-State Land Company also introduced on a large scale the production of sugar beets. This new agricultural product added tremendous economic strength to the area's farm economy and remains the economic backbone of this region. And this was all written in 1996. And that is all still true today. Further, 23 years, 25, 26, 27, 29 years, further almost 30 years into the future, this is all still true. In 1923, the International Order of Oddfellows took possession of the building. Along with the past noble grands of Rebecca, the Oddfellows have occupied the building to the present day, which was 1996. Both of the benevolent organizations have used this building as their meeting hall. And I forgot to write today that the building is now, I forgot to write the name, but they do headstones.
I was going to say, that's the one thing that I always found creepy about the building,
Yeah.
is that it's just a giant warehouse of tombstones.
Yeah.
For years, my entire childhood.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a small graveyard outside of this place. And it's always been creepy because there's never any lights on. The Oddfellows are creepy. I went to an antique shop in Sioux Falls, and this guy in this shop gave up all his old Oddfellows regalia. And I don't know if you know about the Oddfellows, but they're like, I can imagine if the Masons really are this way, the Oddfellows took it up a notch. Because, I mean, they had the cult robes, the creepy masks, all the things that you think out of Mason conspiracy was there. It's all there. And I know it's all symbolic bullshit and stuff, but it's really, really interesting because they had some fascinating artifacts from the Oddfellows who, like I said, they are much like the Masons. God knows what they do. I don't think they do anything just like the Masons. I think it's something for old men to feel important personally. And yeah, they do charitable work, and that's why they are important, and they feel they're important, and good for them. But as far as all the brouhaha that goes behind it, I think is absolutely funny. And like whoever came up with that was just, I applaud them. It's like, let's come up with a fraternity and make our fellow members do the most stupidest things. It's like, what do you got in mind? Anybody? Yeah, that's...
Yeah. And it's been the, I think monument's in the title. It's escaping me, the one thing I forgot to do, what it is today. But you drive by the building and you have all the headstone examples there. So
yeah, you do. It's been that way forever.
Yeah.
It's been that way forever.
So the Tri-State Land Company headquarters building was officially entered into the National Register on January 25th, 1997. So
if it's in the register, does that mean we have the right to go and see it? I've always found that interesting, that if taxpayers are supposed to be taking care of these buildings, don't we have a right to go see them?
Yeah, I would think so.
I would hope so. But that's not true for the Lincoln House. You can't just wander into the Lincoln House. But that's on the historic register.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a, Yeah,
I wonder if they would.
You want us to help preserve it, don't you think? I wanted to see the inside of that ever since I was a kid. I always thought it was a cool old house. I mean, it looks like a giant barn.
It does, yeah.
It is in that Dutch style. And there's a couple other examples of houses that are kind of like that. One was out in Minnetonka, still is. I think it got rebuilt because it got hit by a tornado. And then there's one in my neck of the woods that's kind of a Greco-Dutch style that still has that, I would almost call it an eye. It's like a oval with flares on the compass directions. And you can see them on the eave. You mentioned you can see them on the eve of the house, but you can also see them in other classic works around here. So that's kind of interesting if you're an architect fan.
I would imagine just from driving around Scottsbluff, the interesting houses around here, if you're an architecture fan, you would be interested.
There's some interesting ones, especially in the older districts around St. Agnes where the Carpenter Mansion is. Those houses are particularly older. Even my house, which is not interesting at all, still goes back quite a ways. I want to say back to the 50s or 60s.
Well, you're on the avenues, right?
Yeah, I'm on the 8th Avenues.
Yeah. That's a thing here in Scottsbluff when I moved here and people found out, I wasn't from here. Oh, do you plan on living on the avenues? I'm like, well, I plan on living on a street somewhere. I had no
But
idea
the streets
what
are
that
better.
was.
But the avenues are better than the streets. You want to live on the avenues.
Yeah. And then there's Snob Hill.
There's Snob
But,
Hill, yep.
I've driven up on Snob Hill. I don't really like the style of houses that are up there.
No, there's a lot of it's basically the doctors and the lawyers and people and investors from Colorado that come and plop a house down that they think is pretty without much thinking about everything around it. Which at the time it kind of makes sense because the way Snob Hill came about, I mean, there's nothing out there. So it was really one of those land developments where it's a house here. And then a few years later, it's a house here, and you have years and years between these houses, and there's just nothing out there. So yeah, you get wacky styles. There's a style out there that's all the old Spanish style with like terracotta tiles, and then right next to it's this gorgeous English style manor. So I don't know.
I'm almost positive I know exactly where you're talking about. Yeah, and then. When I was still at the paper, there was a dude that came here from York, Nebraska, worked for the company, and he was our new publisher. And people were amazed. Oh my God, you bought a house in town. They expected him to buy a house up on Snob Hill, and he was just like, why?
Yeah. And that's the greatest thing about because you have the Snob Hill, for those who don't know, you have the Snob Hill in Scottsbluff, and then you have the Snob one in Gehring. And the one in Gehring is really probably the most hilarious because you have all these quite beautiful manors and houses, but right behind that's the landfill. So you have all this trash blowing into these beautiful houses all the time. Because it's Nebraska, and there's not a berm or a fence high enough that you're going to build to stop this trash flowing into these expensive houses. So there's just a delicious irony going up to these places and just kind of having your own hee ha ha. It's like, it's a really nice place, but man, you got Walmart bags fucking all over that place. What the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah. So sometimes I think buildings are important all the time, but if you drive by a house or a business and you start to wonder, I would say just walk in and ask people. People like to talk about their buildings most of the time.
I like to talk about my house for those who listen. It's not, like I said, it's not a very interesting house, but it was built in the 40s, 50s.
Oh, okay.
And when I first moved in there, it had an old-fashioned fire alarm, which was almost looks like it's nothing like our modern ones. This thing, I felt like if it went off, it would wake up the neighborhood. I mean, they just had those giant school bell kind of bells on them that would just go off like a racket. And we took that down, but that was one of the things I remember coming into that house, one of the old things we had.
Yeah.
And we still had the old, you could go downstairs to this day and still see the old, I forgot the style of wirings that it is, but it's the old ceramic wiring systems.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
just the ceramic knobs, and they had the wire going around. Incredibly dangerous nowadays. It's like, looking at that, it's like, holy cow, how did we do that without burning these houses down? But yeah.
Well, that's like when I went to Tanzania in 2005. There are wires on the street. Somebody just tacks a wire up there and connects into the electric.
Yeah. I've seen that too in Mexico.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And you're going, how has everything not burned to the ground? But
it works.
It works, so that's what happens. And then when in our old place we wanted to have the basement finished, my father-in-law was an electrician, and he gave us crap because we didn't do the wiring ourselves. And I'm like, okay, we're book smart people. We are not electricians. We are not going to burn our house down. So we paid a guy to do it, and I'm not kidding, he did the entire basement in about 2 hours, and he had everything to Nebraska code. So first, I got to go research Nebraska code. We only wanted one plug in the basement. He's like, yeah, no, the code says they have to be this, I don't know, however many feet apart or whatever. Yep. So we ended up with a bunch of them that we don't use. Like in this basement here where we sit, there's a plug over there, there's a plug behind me, behind here, there's another one over there. We don't use them, we don't need them, but the law says they have to be there, so they're there. I didn't want to go through that. It was worth it to me to say, here, Mr. Dude that went to electrician school and is an experienced electrician, please do this for me.
Right.
So anyway,
if
you see a building, go in and ask about it. Most people will talk to you about it. And if not, maybe we can find out more information about it for you and do an episode on it. For now, that's all we got. It's a building, not a person, and not a bighorn sheep. And we will talk to you next time.
I'm Connor. I'm Irene.
We don't know who we are.
Usually you're the one that's...
I know. I wanted to try and get you to do it the first time.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Irene.
And this is Storytelling on the Plains. Ah.